Mr. President of the General Assembly, Mr. Secretary General of the United Nations, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we have gathered here today to commemorate the 15th anniversary of Srebrenica Genocide. Before we begin, let us once again remember and honor the victims by a moment of silence. Thank you very much. Allow me in the beginning to give a few opening remarks. Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, today, by our presence at the headquarters of the United Nations in New York, we pay tribute to the victims of the genocide in Srebrenica, to those who were massacred, and to those who are still alive but without their relatives. On July 11, in 1995, exactly 15 years ago, genocide occurred in Europe, this time in Bosnia and Herzegovina. On that day, the town of Srebrenica, which had been declared safe area and demilitarized zone under the protection of the United Nations, became a theater of the worst crimes committed on European soil since the end of the Second World War. In the protected zone of Srebrenica, in just several days, more than 8,000 Bosniak men and boys, ages under 15, men over the age of 65, were systematically murdered, and women and children expelled from the enclave. The mothers lost their sons, the wives their husbands, the sisters lost their brothers, and daughters their fathers. Until today, some of them are still trying to find their remains throughout forests and mass graves in order to find peace in their souls and finally graves for their relatives. Those who didn't surrender themselves to the army and police believed that their chances for survival were greater if they attempted to escape through the mountains and forests in order to reach safe territory. They formed a column called March of Death, consisting of around 15,000 men and boys, aimed to break through the rugged mountains to Tuzla. This was a calvary of over 100 kilometers on foot. The vast majority of the men and boys were killed upon surrendering to the military forces and buried in mass graves. In order to hide the magnitude of this act, its perpetrators removed bodies from primary to secondary mass graves. Therefore, even after 15 years, remains of half of victims have not been found yet. In 2004, in a unanimous ruling of the prosecutor versus Radovan Krstić case, the Appeals Chamber of the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, ICTY, ruled that the Srebrenica massacre was genocide. Furthermore, in February 2007, International Court of Justice concurred with the ICTY judgment that the atrocities committed at Srebrenica constituted genocide. One of the judges of the International Criminal Tribunal described Srebrenica genocide as truly scenes from hell, written on the darkest pages of human history. Thanks to the work of the United Nations International Crime Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, it is undeniable who planned and executed the genocide as well who assisted them. However, this terrible tragedy is even more painful for victims and those who share their pain and sadness, since it took place under the eyes of the entire international community and the United Nations, whose role was to protect this population. Unfortunately, that was not the case. The Srebrenica genocide became a symbol of failure of international community to intervene and protect the civilian population. The United Nations Secretary General's report on Srebrenica from 2000 unequivocally states, enough strength to believe that truth and justice can bring reconciliation, and that's why the struggle for justice must be the priority for the peoples in Bosnia and Herzegovina and in the region. The justice is never perfect, but the only way towards building confidence climate necessary for the reconciliation. During and after the genocide in Srebrenica, even the silence makes us accomplices, while the denial, by definition, is the last stage of genocide. The universal right to life has been taken away, as well as our right to forget. May souls of victims of Srebrenica genocide rest in peace. Thank you. Now, I would like to give the floor to His Excellency, Dr. Abdusalam Treki, the President of the General Assembly. Please.
Mr. Secretary General, Ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, we meet here today to remember and pay tribute to the victim of the Srebrenica massacre 15 years ago. The Bosnian city of Srebrenica was the scene of the worst crime in Europe soil since the Second World War. 18,000 unarmed civilians, including young boys, were killed as a part of an ethnic cleansing campaign by Serb forces in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Srebrenica today serves as a painful reminder of the danger of hatred, racism, and prejudice. The international community as a whole, including the United Nations, has to accept a share of the responsibility for not doing enough as a safe area. Our collective failure to respond to the evidence of the genocide in Srebrenica weigh heavily on the international community. The quest for justice after the massacre has been slow, but for survivors and relatives of victims, there is some comfort to be drawn from the fact that the International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia has recognized the mass killing on Srebrenica as a genocide and sexual